All right, everybody, welcome. We're going to be working with data sets today. So the first thing I'm going to do is open Excel. I'm going to make a blank workbook because we are going to import some data. So step one of importing here is, let's make this a lot bigger so you can see what's going on. I'm going to choose import. This is a Mac, obviously. If you're on a PC, you have a different place, but you can find that because you're very smart. I'm importing a text file. This text file is here. And I will note right now that is comma delimited. So we have a comma between every cell, and you can hardly see that there, but we're going to pick delimited here. I need to click that there's a comma, and if I'm being a purist, notice Excel likes to have tabs as delimiters, but we are using a comma here, so I'm going to hit next. Here, the column format, I can pick, for example, here this is text. I've got birth dates here, there's dates here and dates here. So I could pick which I wanted to do, but honestly, general works just fine, and I can actually change that later. So I'm just gonna hit finish, and then I need to pick where it starts putting the data, and I need it at A1. So the first cell in this spreadsheet, I'm gonna hit insert, import, and then here we have it, okay. So, notice here this little data sheet has employee name, when the employee was born, what unit they were working in, where that unit is located, when they were hired, and when the end date was. Now, there's a bunch of data down here. We're not going to look at all of it, but we can see where things kind of get interesting here. You'll notice here Anisha appears twice. So we've got Anisha here, hired in accounting. In April, a few years later in March, leaves the accounting department, appears to be now they are hired in strategy and they still work in strategy. So it kind of gives you an idea, hopefully, of where the dependencies are in this data. We have fancy words for this in databases, but what we see is employee name and birth date repeat with each other. Oops, Anisha has the same birth date. If we were looking through here, we might find employees that repeat. And so we can say that the employee name and the birth date repeat together. We can also see that the unit and the unit location repeat together. Now, again, you could look through the entire data set and find this out, but that's something we can hopefully see just in these first few records. The final thing is to note here, these hire date and the end date don't actually repeat together at all. What that actually ends up meaning is the things that repeat together need to go in their own table. In this case, we're going to put them in their own worksheet. The things that don't repeat together, meaning they're sort of unique almost to every row, that means we're going to have one sheet that sort of holds all the details. So we can see hopefully there's only accounting, strategy, and marketing as units. And I can actually show you that here as we create a table, especially for the units. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to add a new sheet. I'm going to name that sheet really quickly unit, and then I'm going to paste these in here. Oops. Let me double check I just did that right. C and D, A and B, and I don't know why it's telling me that, but it looks okay. Here, let me zoom in again. I think we were at 200%. So that's very lovely. Now, how do we get rid of, you can see these things repeated together, and what we want is just the unique values. Luckily in Excel, under the data, there is a thing called remove duplicates. So I just hit remove duplicates. I can hit OK, and you'll notice here, now we're down to 3 units, counting, strategy, and marketing. Now, in a minute, we'll go ahead and make some what we call primary keys, or just key values for these. But for now, we're going to make unit its own sheet. We're going to take employee name and birth date, those repeated together. I'm hitting copy again, making a new sheet. This one will be called employee And I'm going to paste these in here. I wonder if I paste it there, it'll be happier. We're going to zoom this up to 100, 200%. It's very beautiful here. Make it nice and wide so we can see. And we're going to do remove duplicates again. This time when we remove, there won't be as many duplicates. Here there's 9 duplicate values found and removed. That means anytime an employee repeated that they were removed. What that means, by the way, is in this list, there were 9 employees who changed departments. So Anisha wasn't the only one. Other people did too. So there's employee. The last one we need is a little bit more complicated because it's actually going to be the employee, the unit, the hire date, and the end date. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just copy all of them. I'm going to hit copy here. I'm going to put a new thing. This one we're going to call employee unit, which is pretty typical. So we have employees, we have units, and then employee unit links employee with unit. That's why we call it employee unit, or why I'm calling it employee unit. Let's zoom back up to 200% so we can see it. What we can do, since birth date is in the employee table, we can delete that column. And in unit, we have the unit name and the unit location, so we don't need the unit location. Now here's a thing, this is from database world, and that is, if we're going to uniquely identify an employee, we shouldn't use text, okay? It's not efficient. It's also that employees might have the same first and last name, so we need to uniquely identify them in another way. Unit is the same thing. I'm going to do unit first to give it what we call a key or an identifier. So I'm going to insert a column here, and in a minute we'll know why we do this, but I'm going to insert here. This will be called unit ID, and I'm just going to number them 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so we have 3 units, unit ID of 1, 2, and 3. Right, employee, I'm going to do the same thing. Next to the employee name here, I'm going to put EMPID, typical to say employee ID. And here I'm going to use the Excel fancy autofill. So I'm selecting the first 2 and I double click on that little square and it fills in, and now we have a unique value for each employee. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That looks beautiful. Now the reason we're doing that is because in the employee unit table, we don't want to use employee name, we want to use employee ID. We don't want to use the unit name, we want to use the unit ID. So this is just something you're going to find when people did a thing. This is a process called normalization. When people normalize a database, they made it so there were numbers for the identifiers. So we need to have an identifier here. This is going to be employee ID. Make sure you use the same names that you used in the other. So empid as empid, unit, unit ID. So we're going to use empid and unit ID. Now, we're going to use an Excel function that we love. It's called VLOOKUP. Now, VLOOKUP takes a value we want to look up. So we're going to look up Leander Vasu. We're going to look up in this table array, or in the employee table, and find out what Leander's employee ID was. So first thing we're going to look up is the name. Then we're going to look up the table. Here it's best to select the entire column if you can. Then I'm going to hit a comma again. This will say call index num. That means what value to bring back. I'm looking up in the table array. I have 2 columns, note, and I want the employee ID, which is the second column. And then the last thing is, do I want to look it up according to values or exact match? Make sure you click false for these because it needs to exactly match. Then I'm going to close my parentheses and hit enter. And I'm going to give you a view of this. Let's make sure it fits in the column so you can see what I typed in. There is the, oops, come on baby, you're not giving me enough space here. Let me go back up again. I'm going to make it even wider so we can really definitely see it. And there's your formula. So I'm VLOOKUPing up the value in A2 from the employee sheet, columns A and B. The 2 means I'm going to return what's in column B, and then the false means I want it to exactly match. All right, now I can copy this and paste it down. I'm going to double click on the fill handle though, because I'm being fancy. So I go click, click, and it fills it down. Notice we can see Anisha repeats. So 2 goes 2 here. There's probably more down here, but we're not going to look because they're in there and we trust it. So usually it's best in Excel when you're working with spreadsheets like this to just double check that it's going to work or doing the right values. Now we're going to do the same thing to unit ID. So I'm going to equal VLOOKUP. I'm going to put my parentheses. I want to look up the name of the unit in the unit table. And then I'm going to look up and give back the second column. And then I do want it to be an exact match, just like I did before. Close my parenthesis, and we're very excited that it looks like we have the right unit ID. Now, what do I need to notice about this? One thing I didn't tell you was, notice here we're looking up. When you use VLOOKUP, the reason why we ended up putting the unit name first in the table and then the unit ID was when you use VLOOKUP, it likes to look up the value you're looking up needs to be in the left column. The value you return can be in any of the columns further to the right. So I could have multiple columns and we might do something with that later. But that's very cool, I think. So there's my VLOOKUP to return the unit. I'm going to double click on here so it fills down, and we're very excited that these all repeat. Now, what I need to do now to make this a proper database is in this table, I shouldn't have the employee name at all. I should only have the unit ID. So in theory, I should be able to delete this column, right? Problem is we're using that column to look it up. So I'm going to undo. Okay, so we can't delete that yet. But what we can do here is since we have looked it up, we can copy this. And now we're just going to replace it with the values. Okay. Now all that work we did on that VLOOKUP is now gone, but what we have is the actual value, and now I can delete the employee name. I'm going to do the same with unit. I'm going to select the whole unit ID. I'm going to copy, and I'm going to paste especially the values. Okay. If you're on a PC, by the way, it's over in Home too. If you hit paste, there's paste values here. Okay. All right, so I'm going to delete the unit. That's very cool. So what we've done now is essentially we've done a process called normalizing. And by the way, if you were a database person, you would have in this hire date, end date, there would be other issues with the table because you shouldn't have blanks in here, but we'll be fine with this blank business. All right, so that's fun. Look at that. So we've basically taken this, what we call a flat file, and let me just name that a flat file then. This is our flat file, and we've taken it out and we've essentially we've normalized it. Like I said, essentially, because these blank fields I don't like. All right, so why did we do that? Well, it's cool. It's really cool. Now what I'm going to do, I'm actually looking over at some notes here to make sure I'm following what I'm supposed to be doing. But what we want to do now is to say, look, all right, we're very excited. Someone gave us this data, and let's analyze it a little bit. We're just going to do a couple of cool little analysis things. One of the things we want to do is say, okay, look, we've got employees. How many employees work in each unit? Okay, so if I look at accounting, I want to know how many employees work here. So I'm going to just write a column here, employee count, and this will be our column that counts the number of employees that work in each department. So Excel has a nice function for this. It's pretty cool. It's called COUNTIF, and COUNTIF will count the things in a range according to criteria. So we're going to count the employees. We're going to use the unit ID. Oops, I didn't delete that yet. Let me fix that really quickly. Unit ID, I actually need to delete, oops, I need to move these. So I'm going to actually move these over, and I'm going to put it in here, insert cut cells, because from now on I need the unit ID to be to the left of unit, because I'm going to use the unit ID and the employee ID as the lookup instead of the name, okay? So that was important here, because look, I've got a unit name here. I need to actually go in and look up in the employee unit table how many employees are in that unit. You see, notice here, unit ID, I need the unit. So let's do that again. Getting all ahead of myself, huh? So I count if. I need to count what's in a range. Let's go into employee unit. We're just going to pick unit ID here, so I'm clicking the entire column. And then the criteria is going to be this unit ID. Okay, so I hit parentheses, and this shows me we've got 32 employees in accounting. Now, you would note, hopefully, that we had employees that ended, so they don't work here anymore. That's a problem. We've actually got less employees than 32 working in accounting. There's probably, if we could sort this probably and get an idea, but we're not going to do that. Well, we should. Well, just leave it there for now. All right, but we need to do or make sure, instead of the employees being counted for being in a unit anytime, we need them to just be currently in the unit. So what I need to do here is, anytime there's an end date, they don't count as being in that unit. What I want them is to just to have been hired and not have had a termination. So I'm going to call this current unit, and I'm going to use an if statement here. So in Excel I do if. I'm going to say if this cell is blank, then it's the current unit. Otherwise, it's blank. Okay, so we'll leave it blank if they have an end date. So notice here there's an end date. And if we were doing this like, I don't know, what are we going to call ourselves? Cool kids? Let me just sort this really quickly so we can see what's going on. I'm going to hit data and I'm going to hit sort. Make sure I say my list has headers, and I'm going to sort by current unit and hit OK. Because what I want to do here is just double check for myself. Of 1, I can see the count is 15. Of 2, the count is 9. Of 3, the count is 4. So now when I go back to unit, instead of counting the column B in employee unit, let's switch over here. That was the unit ID. I want to do column E, which is the current unit. So I'm just going to change that in here because I'm really feeling excited. I'll change that to E to E. I'm going to hit enter. We're going to double click it, and it should be 15, 9, and 4. And we're just going to double check. 15, 9, and 4. All right, now, come on, this is way cooler than, like, we're checking it and being sure, because, you know, when we turn this into the boss needs to trust us. It's nothing more embarrassing, and that's something I've been through, when you go to the boss and you show them a report and the boss looks at the original data and says, that's not right, and then they show you what you did wrong. So we're just making sure we check it, that it was right. Okay, so that was cool. What is the current count of employees, or how many employees work in each unit? All right, the next thing we're going to do, let's start in the employee table, and let's see what the name of the unit each employee works in. Okay, so remember here, let's go back to the flat file. In the flat file, in theory, Leander Vasu works in accounting, and in fact, if we sort this by end date, and we might as well just do that, if we sort this by end date, and then we can see, we have to go down to here, we can see who works in each unit. Leander Vasu, Maxine, Anisha, we gotta make sure Anisha is in the right place. But we're going to do a proper lookup here of this. And this is, it ends up being pretty easy now that we've set up our, let me move that column a little shorter. Now that we've set up our current unit table, let's put it in current unit. We have that little current unit column. We got a nice way of doing a VLOOKUP of, I want to look up the employee, and I want to see what unit they work in. So watch this. I'm going to go here, I'm putting the whole thing in. I want to return column E though. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's column 5. And I still want to have that exact match. And this shows us their current unit. Now hopefully there's people in here that don't have a current unit because they don't work here anymore. All right, that's pretty good. And in fact here I could do another sort and we could probably see here, well we could, we'll just leave it. We would count, do a sort by current unit and see who's actually in there. But for now we're going to go ahead and put in here the unit name because I want to look up that too. It's not cool to just have the current unit number, I need the name. So I need to look up the current unit, and that's going to come from the unit table. And I'm going to use, I just need these two columns because I only need the name. If I needed location, I would go ahead and do the third, but that's the second column. And I always want, or for these types, I always want exact match. Okay, so there, look at that. Counting strategy. Notice here it says NA. That's kind of ugly. If I was making a report though, I would want to sort here. Let's go ahead and sort by, should we do by current unit? Doesn't matter, we can do a unit or name. And then we see here, look at that, accounting, strategy, marketing. Looking good, looking good. This is gonna be our 15. Yeah, hey, look at that. All right, so that'll be it for this video. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about what we call normalizing, which is splitting a flat file into multiple tables, and then using VLOOKUP and COUNTIF to do some analysis on those tables. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye.